God bless. God. Now it's just 5 until they are ready. We will see. This is gonna be so much fun. I probably should have looked at what her position would probably be more so, but it's fine. It is fine. What to do until then? I know what I'll do until then. Did I pick the wrong game? I probably picked the wrong game. Dodge. I'm stupid. That would explain it. Oh, sue me, Orna. They don't deserve to be spelled correctly, okay? I'm tired. She is late. Just gotta wait for her to get here. Our libertarian's always late. This is boring. Eric. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. Damn it. You know what? It's time. Fuck it. This is so fucking stupid. This mouse scroll wheel is too sensitive. Is that her? No. Nope. I will DM her. We're gonna have Cookie Click running in the background during this. Whatever. This should be fun. Moxie, she's still setting up whatever she wants to do it on, and this is taking forever. She's like 20 minutes late. This is deranged. Scientific theories are based on our observations. It can't be independent of them. Theories are also like downstream of hypotheses, which are like going to be beliefs in like a weird definition, or could probably like be defined as beliefs. So like it'd be impossible to separate the two. There she is. Let's go. It's starting. I'm just turning this down a little bit. Yeah. Perfect. To the main screen, and we're good.
Hello.
Hey.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, I'm just watching you. Okay. Um, checking my audio. All right. Are you ready to go live?
Yep.
Okay. All right. We're live.
Perfect.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Corinth. I'm a dirty leftist who defends general progressive policies.
Okay. And I am a mean conservative, um, sort of Christian. Well, Christian, but heretical Christian, I guess. And but I'm also a libertarian, so I don't really want to use the government to like enforce Christian morals, but I think they should be culturally enforced.
That is a position to hold, I guess. Um, so I guess we decided on like abortion as the main topic, right?
Right.
I guess the main thing is gonna then be down. What's your position against uh, people being or abortion being a morally okay act?
Okay. So abortion is murder. We have an obligation to our children more than anyone else. So murdering your own child, even if it's inside the womb, especially if it's inside the womb, is pretty much one of the most, no, I'll say the most egregious act that a person can do. It's even worse than killing a random person because you don't have an obligation to take care of a random person. You have an obligation to take care of your child. And if we want to say that it's not murder to abort your child, you have to either deny the humanity of the fetus and say that it's not a person worthy of human rights. I disagree. Um, and or you would have to argue that a parent does not have an obligation to care for their child. And in that case, there's going to be further implications post birth where you're going to have to get rid of child support and all sorts of, well, it's mainly that child support. You can't make men pay child support if you can't make a woman carry her pregnancy. Um, all right.
I mean, I guess the first thing is going to be we're just at that point just arguments can be granting that a fetus is going to be the same thing as one's child. I think that we can like run a few thought experiments to figure out that we're generally not going to value a fetus the same as we would a child. We're going to have like a very large gradient between the two, and one of the simpler things would be like a zygote that just gets fertilized versus a child, human child. We're generally going to choose to save the child in those cases. This is going to be really intuitive, and we're going to end up trying to boil that down and justify that with both beliefs, and that's going to really show us that we do have a meaningful distinction between the two things there. So it wouldn't be like fair to try and grant those two the same status in another state. Like when we're running the idea of it's bad to kill your child, so it's bad to kill the zygote or the fetus or the embryo or any given sort of developmental stage. Um,
Um. Oh, sorry. Were you done?
Also, when we say like we don't have obligations to other people's kids, that's a really weird thing to say. Most people would look at like certain other moral situations, like if you see a child drowning in a kiddie pool and you just literally have to pick the kid up to get them out of it, no harm to you. We would usually say that a person that chooses not to do that is like a bad actor. They're going to be like
Hmm.
baseline moral obligations we have to other people, and especially people who would be at like a lower ability to protect themselves.
I didn't actually say that we don't have obligations to other people's children. I said that we don't have an obligation to other people. Um, for children, it's kind of different because they're not of age. For adults, you don't have a legal obligation to save someone's life, though you morally should. Um, for children, I think that bar would be even higher than for adults, but I'm not aware of any place where it's illegal to not save someone else's child. Um, but morally, you definitely should do that. And comparing children to fetuses, like a child who's been born to a fetus, I don't know why you would have to choose one life over the other. And even if you did, that doesn't mean that one has more moral worth than the other. That just means that um, we prioritize women over men. We prioritize children over adults. We prioritize certain people over others in a life and death situation for who to save, just based on um, the vulnerability of that person. Basically, if they can't help themselves, then you have more of an obligation to help that person than someone else. Um, and like that, even if I had to choose between two of my children, which one to save, that doesn't mean that it would be okay for me to murder the other child. That doesn't follow.
Yeah, when it's not an idea of like following that, it's then going to grant okayness to that. It's the idea that when we try and run a future line down where it's like, it's bad to do X thing X to actor A, and therefore it's bad to thing X to actor B. When we grant those two things very distinct moral worths, it's going to be that's not going to inherently follow. One of the other things then is going to be we generally don't value people based solely on their ability to help themselves, and it's very rarely even that. Like we wouldn't if we had to choose between like a very elderly person who literally can like barely walk, that's just like that, and we have to choose to either save them or save like a fairly active person. This is going to be a case with like organ donations. We do that a lot. This isn't going to be like this is a situation where that will happen, and we don't choose the elderly person because we see it as like a more morally valuable thing to help the person who's going to be able to do more things in their life. This person is going to have more either potential or they're going to have more action or some characteristic that we end up valuing morally. That's also going to be a
Yeah.
thing where we look at with like fetuses and we look at children. There are going to be very few people who, if you put a gun to either a jar of zygotes and a jar of children, they would choose to shoot the children, or there would even be a thought between shoot the children. We generally have a very large distinction between zygotes and fetuses to the point where not fetuses, zygotes and actually born children to the point where we have to look down and see what's creating this distinction. This isn't like a developmental stage. There's going to be a lot more like questioning if we look at any between any of the developmental stages, like a child and an adult. It's going to be a lot harder to choose who you shoot there. There's at least going to be like a thought, but so that's going to be like something that shows that we do value something beyond just like DNA or taxonomy or some other like characteristic that we use to like that's really intuitive there.
Yeah, we make like a cost benefit analysis, like a utilitarian calculation, and we don't really give organs to like really old people because they're going to die soon anyway. And our chances of naturally dying a natural death are very high for the very young, and they're very old. So in the first few weeks of pregnancy, the spontaneous miscarriage rate is pretty high. And then as you get older, obviously, your chances of dying go up very high towards the end there. So, but that doesn't mean that it's okay to murder these people.
Yeah, it's not gonna like follow that's okay to murder those people, but it would be an idea like what then is gonna constitute murder? It's gonna be the unlawful or unjustified killing of a person, and then we look at like what is a person.
Right.
It's
Okay.
probably not going to just be like some sense of like a biological definition, because I can give you like cases where it's going to be a distinct organism of human cells that you're going to say like it's not going to constitute murder to cause this to die. So like if I cut off a finger and you took the finger that got cut off and you held it away from me so I can reattach it, that clump of cells there would end up dying. But that wouldn't be murder. It would be a separate action that you can say like might be a bad thing there, but it would be like maybe assault or bodily harm, even though you're causing like a distinct set of cells to die then.
Yeah, that would be assault, but you as a person are still alive because the rest of your body is alive. So that's why it wouldn't be murder. But for a fetus, it is a human and it's alive. And then in an abortion, you kill it.
I mean, what makes the rest of my body the part that's not valued instead of the fingertip that we cut off? What's the distinction there? What makes the rest of those cells more valuable than that?
I'm not saying that a fetus is more valuable than your finger. No one should cut off your finger either.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's like more valuable. I'm saying when we ran the finger cut off example and it was like the rest of your body is still fine. So if we reverse that and instead we put the fingertip on ice and we like hooked it up to some sort of like blood diffusion system and it ended up keeping that fingertip alive and the rest of my body died instead, we generally say that part was murder still, even though there's still a set of cells that are alive.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be, we're not valuing like some distinct set of cells being alive. It's some like emergent property of those cells that we end
No.
up seeing.
Because a fetus is not a part of the woman. The fetus is a distinct human being and distinct organism inside of the mother. It's not a part of the mother. It's not an appendage of the mother.
Uh, that wasn't like the point of the hypothetical, but that's still also not inherently going to follow, because we generally say things like the bacteria in our like digestive tract are going to be like a part of us. The enzymes in our cecums that,
Bacteria aren't human.
yeah, they're not.
They're
They're still like
inside
a
of
part
us
of
and
us.
they help us digest our
They're
food.
distinct organisms though, right?
Yeah, but they're
We'd
not
yeah, we'd
humans. They're
still say that they're
bacteria.
like a part of us though.
No, they're inside of us and they help us. We have a mutually beneficial relationship with the bacteria, but they are not human and they are not our offspring.
Okay, if you want to go down there, then it's still gonna follow that we can look at like what emergent property we value in humans to determine it being killing, because we've shown like you can kill any given set of cells and it's not going to constitute murder if it's like a fingertip, because there's the way we ad hoc that is going to be, well, you're not killing the whole thing, and then we can flip which side stays alive and it's just the fingertip that stays alive, and we're like, and we realize that that does constitute murder. So there's going to be like an emergent property of that cluster of cells that we end up valuing as life beyond just some biological idea of DNA, human DNA in a living set of cells.
It's not a living set of cells, it's a human being, it's the organism.
Do you think like human beings aren't living sets of cells?
I mean, they are, but that's not all they are.
Yeah, there's like something beyond that, which is where we're trying to figure out, does a fetus constitute that?
Okay, what is the emerging property that you think should constitute moral worth to be a person?
I think consciousness is what we generally end up seeing as valuable of human worth. And we can run different like thought experiments to see that the majority of people have that same intuition.
Can you define that?
It's going to be the ability to like interpret certain brain states and have certain mental experiences.
Can you be more specific?
It's the ability to interpret things beyond a direct feedback loop.
What does that mean?
So if I showed you the color red, there's when you see red, there's going to be more than a direct A goes in, B goes out feedback loop in your brain. You're going to start having different sets of like correlations with that. You might see like red, and as red comes out, you're also seeing some sort of like emotional state. You're seeing some sort of like correlations with that. You're able to actually interpret things beyond I put in hormone A and hormone B comes out, and then hormone C comes out and hormone D comes out in a balancing system that you'd see in like really simple organisms.
So fetuses do have that. They recognize their mother's voice. They can recognize their father's voice if he's around. You can play little games with them and poke them, and they poke back.
Yeah, at certain stages. I don't think like a 40-week or yeah 40-week abortion would be like an okay thing to do. I think it's generally going to end up having that cutoff point around where we start seeing that property emerge from the fetuses.
Okay, so what's that cutoff point, and how would we know that it's reached it?
It's going to generally be around the 22 to 24-week mark is when we start to see this emerge in the majority of fetuses. If
How
we
do
run
we know that?
because we run studies on them, we see exactly when they start to have these outcomes given these set of stimuli. We also see which
I don't
structures
think so.
are required for this. Like you need a brain for to be able to like experience the voice, right?
Yeah,
We start seeing like
but
brain
I don't
development.
think we have any way of knowing when a fetus starts to have that kind of mental processing.
Oh, we do.
You're just picking 23 weeks because that's when the fetus can survive outside the womb.
No, said 22 to 24 weeks is generally the range we start seeing that brain waves end up start to come out of the fetus. We start seeing those things when we start to measure them using ultrasounds and MRIs on the mother's body, and we start seeing what developmental stages the fetus is in. We start seeing that the brain stages that we see in humans' ability to interpret these things in like people that are already born, and we see when those parts end up developing to the point where we'd have a reasonable assumption that they're going to be usable for the fetus, and that's going to be around the
Um,
point.
so coma patients, so they should just be, they don't get personhood because they don't have consciousness.
I mean, we see that when we have people who are brain dead, we're allowed to pull the plug on them, and we generally wouldn't say that's murder, right?
Some people wake, that's brain dead.
Yeah, because
People who are brain dead,
they
whose
don't have the ability
brains,
to experience consciousness anymore.
people who are in a coma aren't conscious.
They're not currently conscious, but they have the ability to experience consciousness.
Right. So they might experience consciousness in the future.
No,
So when
it's not
someone
like
is
a might
declared,
in the future. It's they have all the parts required to, and they have a reasonability given a certain extent of external stimuli. So, like if we injected them with enough cocaine to restart their heart or restart their brain and just wake them up for like 5 minutes, they'd experience consciousness. It might kill them in the process, but they'd physically be able to given external stimuli.
um, I think the reason why we consider it okay to um, euthanize people who are brain dead is because they have lost the ability for their brains to work and they will never be able to wake up because our brains can't heal. If our brains could heal and we did have the ability to wake up after being brain dead, then it wouldn't be okay to euthanize people who were brain dead. And that's the same reason why it doesn't make any sense to argue that it's okay to kill a fetus because it's below a certain threshold of consciousness because it will in the future.
We can see that with like sperm as well. It will in the future given a certain set of circumstances. Like if the mother stopped eating when she was pregnant, the fetus would also end up dying. So we need
Right.
a certain action to happen for this. We wouldn't say like masturbation is then going to be murder or mass murder because you're killing a ton of things that could end up having consciousness or will end up having consciousness given
But
those set of
sperm
stimuli.
aren't human beings.
It's going to we can then say like would it be like killing sperm then? Would you be killing those things that are not humans but are going to be its own distinct DNA?
But fetuses are human beings.
But yeah, is it you gonna be mass murdering whatever you want to define the species of sperm as though?
What?
When okay, would a period count as killing whatever species we're defining an egg as? Since we're saying it's not human, it's gonna have some sort of species still, right?
It's it's a gamete of a human, but until it joins with a sperm, it's not as a distinct human being. It has potential to become a human being, but it's not a human being.
Yeah, it's gonna. What are you defining a human being as then? I guess.
The organism of an alive human with a distinct set of DNA, though twins share a set of DNA, but it's the organism of a human that's alive.
What's gonna be a symmetry breaker between like saying that the difference in DNA, it's gonna be human DNA, right? That's what sperm is. They're gonna be human sets of DNA that are distinct.
It's a half set, yeah.
Yeah, and like you're not always gonna have like a complete set or like a full set. They're gonna be like chromosomal mutations that are gonna be either duplication or deletion events. This is why we see different like um, traits named as like 47 or 45, 21. I think it's 4721 is Down syndrome, where you have where you don't have the normal set of chromosomes, but you have human DNA.
People with Down syndrome still have a full set of DNA. They just have a bit extra. It's extra, right?
There are also going to be situations where like you have 45, you don't have the complete set of DNA. Then would they still be human?
Right. Yeah.
It's like it's not like having the complete set that then makes you human. If we're saying that people without the complete set can still be human,
It's not someone has it's a sperm and egg have a half set. And they're still half it's half of a set of DNA. Somebody who is a human who has the wrong number of chromosomes is still a human.
yeah,
They're still a
the
human
sperm are
being.
humans with just the wrong number of chromosomes. Then
They're not just they don't just have the wrong number of chromosomes. They're not an organism. They're a single cell gamete.
that's an organism.
They're not a system.
Uh, there's still going to be systems. Single cells are more complicated than just what we'd intuitively think they are.
Okay, fine. But it's not a human being because it doesn't have a full set of DNA, and it doesn't unless it joins up with an egg, it's not a human being.
So if we're saying like it not having a full set of DNA is going to be sufficient to make it not a human, there are people who have a 23rd chromosomal paired deletion event where they have a single X chromosome or sometimes a single Y chromosome there. They're lacking the full set of DNA that we'd ideally or that we'd expect to see in a human. They only have 45 chromosomes then.
They still have their full set. That's
Yeah,
that's a full
the
set
sperm
for
has
them.
their full set too then. It's a full set for that sperm and it's human DNA.
Yeah, the sperm has its full set, but that's not a full set for a human.
Yeah, and then that the 45 chromosomes aren't a full set for a human either then.
I think we should just move on from this because we're just going in circles.
uh, we're not we're really on this point here because we're trying to define like what is a full set for a human, and then there's not like a sufficient symmetry breaker between someone who has a deletion event on their 23rd chromosome and like a sperm or an egg cell.
I mean, this is just such nonsense. A human being is a human being. If you don't want to if you don't want to define it at conception, then you have to define it someplace else. Conception is the best place to define it. The sperm and the egg come together, create a unique set of DNA as a human being. It has the potential to become a fully fledged outside of the womb, one day be an adult with full consciousness, etc.
uh,
Right?
you can say that at like any given point. You can say that you have the most potential even at like the 24-week mark when you can viably survive outside the womb, if you want to say that. Was why I was saying that. That's where you have the most potential to become something else. If we're saying that is the potential to blossom into a human being, that's also granting that it's not a human being at that point, right?
Um, the most potential. I don't know if you can call it, if you can say, if you can judge when something has the most or least potential.
Uh, Obviously, we can. We can look at like what's the likelihood that this situation is going to go out that way. At what point is the
Yeah,
likelihood the highest? And one of the highest points we can say at the definition point is going to be when it's the 24-week mark. You even admitted earlier that the highest
that's
rate
not
of
your
death,
highest.
that's going to be
That's
one
not
of the
your
highest
highest rate of
points.
survival.
You're right, that's not the highest rate of survival. Your highest rate of survival is when you're like 35.
Well, the highest rate of survival is going to be when you're like 5, 10 years old.
Yeah, it's just gonna be like a wildly point that we're outside of where we're what we're trying to define at that point. We're losing the argument to try and figure out that point. We're trying to hit the essence of what is going to be like the potential point that we would want to see. When we're saying that like the highest rate of death is going to be at like the very early stages where you're gonna have spontaneous
Hmm.
miscarriages, we're saying
Hmm.
that there's a really low potential point there. We can also
It's
say
not a low. It's not a low potential point. There's a high rate of death, and that's also true for very old people. But that doesn't mean it's okay to murder them.
yeah, it's not okay to murder them. I don't think it's going to be murder because I don't think it's going to be what we say we mean by murder. I don't think like stopping a distinct set of cells from living is going to constitute murder, as shown by like the finger cut off examples. We found out that like when we flip it though, we do constitute a certain set of distinct cells being killed as murder. That's because it's stopping some sort of emergent trait that we see. The emergent property we generally end up relating to that is going to be consciousness, and we can run a ton of different hypotheticals about that. Would you consider it murder if someone had their head cut off and their head's living in a jar, but like you can still talk to them, they're still able to like communicate, they're put on like an iron lung or something, and then they're just they're able to talk, they're able to speak, they're able to think, they're able to do everything that we can do through this computer right now.
No.
If you cut off their head and the head died and it was just their body, their physical, the lower part of their body, you put on like a little Elon Musk GPU chip into it and it's able to like walk around. It's like a robotic kind of thing though. Would that be murder?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what's going to be causing it to be murder in that case?
It's just the same reason why it's not murder to euthanize someone who's brain dead and has no chance of waking up, but it is murder to murder somebody who is in a coma but has the possibility of waking up. It's about the potential that they will be able to wake up,
Would you think
and
not getting
fetuses have
pregnant
that.
would be like a form of murder then? Because you're like stopping something that had the potential to gain
No,
consciousness to end up being born. What's going to be the distinction between like a zygote and embryo and a egg cell?
the distinction is that one is a gamete and one is a human.
Yeah, what makes one of them? What makes the gamete not a human? Because that's human DNA. It's a human cell, and it's going to be its own distinct human life at that point. It just doesn't have the set of chromosomes that we'd expect to see from most humans. We already admitted earlier that someone who doesn't have that can still qualify as human, given can still qualify as human.
A gamete is a human's reproductive cell. A fetus is a human being that is an organism.
A, a gamete is an organism. A gamete is going to be a human cell. A zygote is going to be a human reproductive cell as well. It's just at a later. It's the combination of two of them at that point.
Right? A human being.
A human being is a combination of two reproductive cells. That's the only way we're going to define it.
I mean, a human being is created by combining two reproductive cells.
Yeah,
A gamete, sex or reproductive cell containing only one set of dissimilar chromosomes or half the genetic material necessary to form a complete organism. Gametes are formed through mitosis, in which
it's
a germ cell
meiosis, not
undergoes
mitosis. MEI.
meiosis. During fertilization, male and female gametes fuse, producing a diploid i.e., containing paired chromosome zygote.
Yeah, a gamete is a haploid cell of the organism. A zygote is going to be the diploid cell. These are just two different stages of the reproductive cycle. What makes
Mm-hmm.
one of those the cutoff point for where we say potential is going to be starting to be valuable?
Well, there is potential in a gamete, but it's not a human being.
What
I
makes
do
it not a
put
human being?
I do put some moral worth on like I'm not a big fan of birth control. Like ideally you wouldn't masturbate, you wouldn't use birth control, and every time you have sex you would be open to the possibility of pregnancy. I'm not saying I want birth control to be illegal or anything like that, but there is, if you're going to be pro natalist, and you want to go all the way, I mean that's a position that you would take, and that's a position I take, is that children are good, humans are good, having more humans is good, and the function of sex is to reproduce, and the function of pregnancy is to have a baby. And if you go in and you disrupt that process, you are going against the natural order. And to but obviously, to take a fetus, a human being that's living inside of the mother, that she has the responsibility of taking care of and mothering until at which point she could possibly hand it off to somebody else to take care of it if she doesn't want to, or if she's not able to, she has to take care of that child. And if she refuses to take care of that child and murders it, that is murder, and it's wrong, and it shouldn't be socially acceptable, it shouldn't be promoted. And it's a rejection of human life, and it's really a culture of death, and it's really rejecting the beauty of life and this and how life is sacred. If you're able to kill a fetus, the most innocent human that there could possibly be, uh, you don't hold human life as being sacred. And that's going to have more implications for even that child that was murdered in the womb. It's going to have implications for society and the moral fabric of everyone, and how we think about things. If we start calculating, oh, is this person conscious enough to have moral worth, we start thinking about people as cogs in a machine instead of really genuinely holding that all human life is sacred.
Yeah, we don't hold that all human life is sacred. We would say that with like brain dead people. We'd say that even though they're like biologically alive, it's not going to be a sacred life because it doesn't have that emergent property we see. Even you were going to say that like it's not that. It's going to be the potential of that emergent property. Is what so like
I think that brain dead person is still, they're they're physically alive, but they have no possibility of ever waking up. And so it's morally acceptable to pull the plug, though you still, it's hard because it's hard to tell when someone's truly brain dead. And there's been cases where they're arguing about it, and the doctors want to pull the plug, but then a parent says no, uh, I still have hope that they're going to wake up, and the person ends up waking up, and you don't know for sure what that possibility is. So I would err on the side of not pulling the plug. But if there really is no potential there, and you're just going to live a life like a nothing life, um, or if you're going to die a slow and painful death, which I deviate from the Catholic Church on that, I can see that it could be rational to say, okay, you know what, it's okay to euthanize at that point. But I mean, I would much rather err on the side of being more careful and avoiding murdering people than being on the side of like, yeah, it's okay to murder people.
Yeah, I'd probably agree, but it's gonna come down to what makes the brain dead person being able to wake up, being morally relevant, right? That's gonna feed back into consciousness.
Right. There's something about consciousness and it's like, is the soul no longer in the body if the person is brain dead?
S-
You know?
If like the soul's no longer in the body, then the zygote never had the soul to begin with. It just has the potential to get the soul.
Yeah, I guess if you're religious, you might argue about when the soul inhabits the fetus.
So like it would be fine before the soul gets there. Then
I don't know how we would know that when it's when it comes in.
if I can show you like if we're going to like Loki's wager, do you know what Loki's wager is?
Probably, but go ahead and
Loki's wager is the old story where it's Loki made a bet with a dwarf, and he said that if I lose this bet, you can have my head. He lost the bet, and then he went to the dwarven kingdom. He told them, "You can have my head, but you can't have an inch of my neck. You can have literally none of my neck, because that wasn't a part of the bet." So the dwarven executioners were trying to figure out where exactly they could cut his head off without getting
hmm
any of his neck. Now,
hmm
one thing that could have been done is they err way on the side of consciousness, caution. You can cut like here. This isn't like at my cheek. It's not going to be my neck. All you're going to get is head. No one's going to even argue that like anything below that is that. You're going to leave a bunch of head there, but you're not going to get any neck. So if I can show you a point where there's no possible way for it to happen before that, but I'd leave like that'd be like a hyper conservative estimate. Would that be a point you'd say it's okay to abort it?
We went from Loki's neck to abortion
Yeah.
all of a sudden, and I'm not sure how that
Yeah,
maps.
because you said that you're not. I'm not going to be able to tell you exactly where it's going to start. I'm not going to be able to show you where it's going to start. I can show you a point that there's no possible way that it's going to start before that point. Just like in Loki's, it's going to be Loki's wager. You can't show me the exact point it starts, so it's not okay to cut the head off. But you can err way on the side of caution and still cut the head off, but you're leaving the head. You're cutting before it starts, before you get to the argumentation point.
Okay. So I would err on the side of let's not murder humans.
Yeah, I'm agreeing. We can err on that side by going way before consciousness starts. Like if I told you at like 12 weeks, like that would be the point for the cutoff. If that was the point we're saying the cutoff for it being morally okay is because there might be like some niche case where there's like brain starting to develop. You might get a couple neurons at that point.
But they, even if the fetus doesn't yet have consciousness, they have the potential to become conscious. This is why it's okay to euthanize people who are brain dead because they have no possibility of becoming conscious. If our neurons, if our brains could heal themselves, it would not be okay. Because even if the person isn't conscious right now, they would have the potential to become conscious. So it doesn't even matter if the fetus doesn't have consciousness yet because it will.
So what if the mother does things that just stop it from having the potential to? Would then that be like an okay thing? So like she would not eat enough nutrition that would be required for the baby or the fetus to survive. It's not going to end up being able to develop past that point because of that. She's not actually attacking the baby. She's just removing some of the possibility of potential there. She's removing that potential.
You have an obligation to eat when you're pregnant
Why does she have an obligation to eat while she's pregnant?
because that's how you feed your baby.
Yet it's you're already begging to the point then that it's not the potential there; it's the value there. You're trying to say you're obligated to protect someone else's potential. Am I obligated to like jump in front of a car for you to try and
You're
stop it?
not obligated to jump in front of a car for me. You are for your children.
Am I obligated for like any given child?
No, but you are for your children.
What
And I
makes
am for
my
my
children
children
more valuable than someone else's child?
because they're your child.
What makes them being
That's
my
how it
child more
works.
valuable?
because that's the parent-child relationship. Every child has two parents, and they have an obligation to care for that child. That's the natural order.
Uh, Something being natural doesn't mean it's like an ought claim, though, right?
I didn't say it was natural. I said
You're
it's the
saying it's like
natural
it's the
order.
natural order. Like natural order
Mhm.
doesn't mean something's like an ought claim that should be valued, right?
I'm saying natural order is an ought claim.
Yeah, that doesn't mean like we should value that ought claim. It's gonna be like the it is natural, so we ought. It is part of the natural order, so we ought do it, right?
We ought to value the natural order because if we don't, everything goes to shit.
What do you constitute as the natural order then?
Um, it's like so many things. Like it's just like how the world works, and specifically when we're talking about how society should be, it's the moral code that humans should live by in order to have good lives, in order for things to work properly. Like we are humans, we are part of a human society, and we need to live by certain rules in order for that society to work smoothly. And
Yeah,
I believe that one day we will live in God's kingdom where everything works perfectly. And the better we adhere to the natural order, God's law, the more the better things will get until that state of perfection.
what part of God's law says you should value your children more than you should value another child?
It's not so much value, it's obligation to care for.
Yeah, what part of God's law makes it like you're more obligated to care for things that are more genetically similar to you than another being?
Because we I mean, why are you obligated to care for your own children more than somebody else's? Because they're your children. That's just like the deal. And like, if we weren't gonna, like I said in my opening statement, if we're going to say that's not the deal, we're not going to care for our own children, we don't have an obligation to do that, you're going to have interesting implications for society because you're not going to be able to charge men child support. You're not going to be able to charge parents with neglect. It's just going to be a free for all. There's going to be no obligation for parents to care for children whatsoever. Like that's not going to work out well.
It's
And
actually
any
the opposite way is what I'm asking the question. I think we should value our children. I think we should also value other people's children. I think we should value all human life. I don't think that we should like all human life with that experiential quality and that emergent property that we value.
you keep going from obligation to value, but I'll switch it back to obligation.
Sure.
I don't have an obligation to care for an other person's child because I did not consent to that. When you have sex, when you consent to sex, you consent to caring for any child that might result from that sex. That's the contract you make with God when you have sex.
I mean, we already
Someone else's child, I did not consent to take care of their child.
yeah, and we already like showed that we would still agree that there's going to be a level of obligation we have to that child. Like if they're drowning in a pool and we see that and we have the means to stop it, we should pull the child out. We shouldn't let another child drown just because we didn't consent to it.
Yeah,
It would be a
yeah,
bad act to watch them drown, right?
yeah.
So we have some sort of obligation to those children. Why do we say that our obligation to those children should be like less than the obligation to our children then?
Would you be put in jail if you didn't intervene?
Like
Like, this isn't a child you're watching. You didn't agree to
yeah,
babysit
I
the child.
yeah,
You
you
don't
wouldn't
know
be
this child. It
put
has
in
nothing
jail
to do with
if
you.
like you walked past your own child drowning either.
Yeah, you would.
If
Yes, you
it's
would.
going to be the
That's
same
neglect.
set. Okay, do you want to go into like the legal idea then? Because we'd probably agree more on the legal definitions and the legal thoughts if you want to go with the libertarian arguments, right?
Right. I think that morally you should help other people whenever you can. Definitely. But that's different than an obligation. An obligation, you have to do it, or um like that's like a legal obligation. To me, the word obligation, I think of legal.
So like then I guess we'd probably agree more on the legal parts and we can move on to like more of the oughts in a moral sense. ought
Okay.
you do ought you treat your child as more valuable than you treat another child. So if you have the means to help your child and the means to help another child, and you have the means to help both of them, is there going to be like a reason to only help one of those children?
It would be good to help both. Yes,
So
we should
you'd have like
definitely help people whenever we can.
it's like you ought value other people's children just like you value your own, right?
I value. What do you mean by value?
You'd put moral weight on them. You ought treat them as if they're like similar moral standards and similar
Yeah,
moral
yes, yes, yes,
status.
yes. Absolutely. Yeah.
Then yeah, that's like going to be outside of what we think of as like the natural order, right?
No, because you keep I'm saying obligation and you're saying value. I'm saying you only have an obligation to care for your own children. And you're saying you should value other people's children too. I agree. We should value
Yeah,
all children,
because you were using
but you
obligation
don't
in the
have it
legal sense, and we
right.
agreed that like we're going to probably agree on the legal idea of obligation, which is why we moved right to oughts in a moral sense there,
Right.
and we still agreed on the oughts in a moral sense there. So it's like I wasn't saying ought while you were
So
using
I'm not sure
obligation
what
there.
argument you're making.
It was the line of where you're saying like you have an obligation to do this for your child, and you were saying that in like a legal sense, but in a legal sense you don't have the obligation to like not abort your fetus either. So it seemed like you were just going in a moral sense and using the word
Can you
both
say that
ways.
again? I'm sorry.
In a
The
legal
last
sense
part.
you don't have the obligation to not abort a fetus,
Why?
because that's just the law of it. If we're using obligation as in what's legal, you we can look at
Oh,
the
no, no,
law.
no. I mean what should be legal or what is legal according to the natural law. I don't mean
How do
um
you determine what
just
should be legal?
the natural law
How do you determine what is natural law then?
by results. Try, like, if you want to start your own society where you parents don't have obligation to their children, you can go do that far away from me and do that and see how that plays out. I don't think it's going to work out very well for you, and your society is going to collapse. And I can do things the way that my civilization has been doing things for 2,000 years. I don't want to go back to Roman times where children were left in the street.
Yeah, we don't have to like leave children in the street to have like an abortion. We can create the
I mean,
distinction
it's
point.
basically the same thing.
It's not. It's even when we look at the effects of when we
It's
passed.
actually worse because when they would put children in the street, they would often get picked up and raised by somebody else, often by Christians. But when you have an abortion, you're actually murdering the child and they have no chance of being raised by anybody else. So it's actually worse than leaving your child in the street.
It's not, but again, we're gonna go back to looking at the results of the things. Do you think that we had better results as like a nation in national stability, in
Yeah.
childcare, in average child health, in average child life, and how children are raised, and the quality of children's lives, after we started passing legislation and having things like Roe v. Wade passed?
Roe v. Wade wasn't legislation, it was court fiat.
That's why I said
But
an and conjunction there. I didn't say that this was the legislation. I said legislation and Roe v. Wade.
um, well, technology has definitely helped uh, life expectancies and everything like that. But culturally, we have suffered a lot. We could be doing a lot better as a society with the technology we have right now. We've been doing really well in the science department, but we've been doing really badly in the morality and cultural department.
Oh,
That's why people are so unhappy. Like, we're living, we're alive, but we're miserable.
what moral standards do you think we're doing worse than now than we were like 30 years ago?
Abortion, sex outside of marriage, having children outside of marriage.
These are all
Um,
things that were happening again like 30 years ago.
before
At
the
that point, you're
sexual
saying like
revolution of,
results are what matters, and then you're saying like that's where determining that abortions are going to be like a worse thing. And you're saying abortion is the measure we're saying that's worse. At that
well,
point, that's
okay, if you want to take abortion off the table, we can look at all the other things. We got birth control, which should decrease the number of unwanted children, right? You would
yeah,
think that's how that would work. If you have birth control,
yeah,
if you've
it has.
invented birth control, you would get fewer unwanted children, but we have more now than we did then.
So would you say like birth control is good then because you're valuing like more children as like a better thing, right? That was your pronatalist position. So we have more children.
Yeah, I think birth control is a bad thing.
So then the result of more children is like a bad thing too, or
Say it again.
you're saying like we're having more children because of birth control, right?
No, we're having more unwanted children as a percentage.
So you feel
We're
like
having
having birth
out of
control.
wedlock births.
So you're saying like were we having less children beforehand then? Were we having more
We were
children today?
having more children before birth control, but on a per capita basis, a higher percentage of those children were wanted, were born within marriage, and families were more functional when people had a respect for sex and they believed that human life was sacred. And like my great grandmother had 10 children, and I asked her, and I was like, did you want to have that many kids? And she's like, oh yes, of course I did. And that just blew me away because I just figured it wasn't really her choice, it was just something that happened to her because they didn't have birth control back then. But it was absolutely something that she wanted because that was the cultural norm at the time. And then we got birth control and we normalized sex outside of marriage because if you're not going to get pregnant, then it's okay to have sex outside of marriage. And but birth control fails a lot. So we had to normalize abortion. And now we've totally dismantled marriage. We have no respect for sex. We have no respect for human life. Our society hates children and is constantly acting like being a parent is the worst thing in the world and acting like children are like the most annoying, terrible, life ruining things. And the children that we do have, half of them are born outside of wedlock, and those are the ones that don't get murdered in the womb. And now our fertility rates are falling below replacement rates. So yeah, we screwed everything up.
So for saying that like we're having less wanted children, it seems like you just get an abortion if you don't want the child, right? That'd be a way to solve that. We can use that as a way to increase the results and the quality of results. We're able to protect people who want children. There are going to definitely still be people that want to have 10 kids now. We have a ton of people who are pronatalist. I don't think that there's going to be the trait of where like your great grandmother is going to then have birth control, so then she's going to not want that. But there are going to be people who were influenced by those cultural norms to be forced to have those situations, and they're not going to be forced to have them now.
Well, I can't know what my grandmother would have been like if she was raised now. We're a product of our society and the culture that we're around.
It, we,
So
yeah, and there's still
when
going to be
we
people who want those 10 kids, right?
some, but the economic situation and the cultural situation is going to make that harder to pull off, and it's going to make less people even want it, because if you're told your whole life that that's crazy, like when people ask me if I'm going to have more kids, I say I'll take as many children as the good lord gives me. Now I'm 37, but when I was younger, people would react horrified. And when I'm like, I'm not very swayed by people's opinions, like I don't really care what people think about me, but a lot of people are, and so that's going to affect people. So even if somebody for some reason just out of the womb they just have the genetic code for wanting 10 children, and it's eventually going to get like not beaten out of them but like worn out of them as they get these messages over and over and over again that children are bad. And if your only metric you're looking at is decreasing the number of out of wedlock births, then you would think, oh well, we should legalize abortion, and the government should pay for it, and the government should pay for birth control and all this stuff to decrease unplanned pregnancy, out of wedlock pregnancies. But in the long term, the effects that it has on culture ends up having the reverse effect because it's against the natural order. These are the types of things when you go against the natural order, you see all kinds of unintended consequences that you wouldn't predict.
So if we do you know what the difference between for white women uh, their birth rates for between abortion being illegal and abortion being legal and funded by the state per hundred or per capita? Like how many
Well,
the difference?
it's gonna depend on the state. and like other factors.
When we like start conglomerating that data, we start like compounding it. We look at places where it's illegal and places where it's legal and funded. What the birth rate difference is going to be?
Um, I imagine that in more Democrat states that the overall fertility rate is going to be lower. Like I am from New York, and when I moved from New York to Kansas, I was amazed by how many babies and pregnant women and just children I was seeing, because in New York, that wasn't something that you really saw very much.
New York, let's go.
Are you still in New York?
Yeah, Barkley jersey on the wall. Have to shoot the Giants out. Shout the Giants out with that one. Sorry. But yeah, if we look at it, it's going to be 8 per 100. That's the birth rate difference, and then we start seeing quality of life increase drastically for those children, because you're going to have less children who are born to like younger parents who are going to be less financially stable, in less stable relationships, and who are just not going to be in a position where they're ready to have the children. We don't see a drastic increase in children being born. We see a very drastic increase in the quality of. Rachel's here. Let's go. God. Okay. But we start seeing very. You're right. I think the USSR was bad, Rachel. But we start seeing the rate of the increase for births not be that high, but we see the quality of life be drastic and huge. So for valuing what children are, and valuing children and valuing quality of life, as well as just life itself, which I think is going to be something that we'd probably also agree on, the better off children are, it's going to be better. Like, it might be a situation where I'd rather have like 9 kids where they're all in like a very stable, very healthy situation than 10 where they're all starving to death. It's not going to be like that stark of a difference, but we're going to see like a point where we start to value quality of life rather than just raw number of lives. And I think that when we look at abortion, that's going to be one where the quality of life is drastically going to outweigh the difference in lives.
Um, yes, that makes sense logically, right? You would think that well, if I'm having trouble feeding the number of children that I have, if I get rid of some of them, I'll be better off. But it doesn't usually end up working that way for some reason, especially in the long run. It's almost like God provides when we do the right thing.
It actually does generally work out this way, which is why we see, even with abortion legalized, we see a very low difference, because people who get abortions end up generally having children later on in life when they're in better situations.
Well, better situation financially, but not better situation physically.
Better situations both
There's a lot of
financially and familially. Like, you're generally going to have more people being married later on in life than they would in like their early 20s, right?
and you're going to have a lot of people who wait, and they wait too long, and then they can't have any children. And that is so sad.
Yeah,
I
it is
would
sad.
much rather have a child too young and struggle than be too late.
I'd rather in those cases they adopt. I'd rather the children who are currently struggling at very poor qualities of life right now end up being
Where are
taken
we
care
going
of.
to adopt these babies from? Where
From
are
the
these babies coming
from
from?
the even our situation where we had legal abortion, hundreds of thousands of children in the foster care system.
Foster care system is completely different from adopting babies. The foster care system is really hard.
Yeah, I don't think they should just adopt the babies. I think that you should adopt the children themselves. I don't think that they need to be like a fresh newborn blank slate to be deserving of
Not
care.
all not all of the kids in the foster care system are up for adoption.
Yeah, maybe not all of them. I think the ones that are should be. I think that there are a large enough amount and a large enough amount who need to be taken care of. That
Yeah,
even
and
if it's,
Christians do.
yeah,
I have a cousin who adopted 2 kids out of the foster care system. Like that's Christians who are stepping up to take care of those foster kids.
it's also
And they
Christians who are
often have a
stopping those foster kids from being in other loving households
what do you
with
mean?
LGBT parents.
Oh, give me a break.
There is
Oh,
no break. Christians
oh
want to
no.
have their cake and eat it too. They want to like posture that, oh, we're doing what we can. We're the good ones, while saying that the children are better off alone than with families that love them.
No, they're better off with ideally your biological mother and father. And if that can't happen, then you're better off with a adopted couple who's a man and a woman who have good moral character.
Yeah, and what's better off being
And
without that adopted couple or being with a gay adopted couple?
you're probably not very very well off with a two male couple.
Do you think
Mm-mm.
they're going to be better off with those two parents, or they're going to be better off alone in the foster system?
I don't want anybody to be alone in the foster system. But the situation that the legal situation we have now is that gay couples can adopt and they're treated the same as heterosexual couples. They can legally get married. And it's actually adoption agencies that do not cater to same sex couples
Yeah, it's
are
the
being
Christian ones,
forced
right?
to shut down, are
Yeah, it's the
being
Christian
forced to shut
ones.
down because they're discriminating.
Yeah, they're discriminating against gay people by posturing about how they're going to be better off alone and in the foster care system than with two loving parents.
These are adoption agencies that are placing people. There are huge wait lists for even disabled children, huge wait lists of people trying to adopt children.
And yet there's still
This
a ton of these children that would be better off because there isn't this long wait list. They're wanting little kids. They're wanting babies that are blank slates
mhm,
because that's
yeah.
what a ton of these parents do. They don't want to raise a child. They want to start with a blank little infant.
It's because it's not like the foster care system is going to give you a 10-year-old and say, here you go, get attached to this 10-year-old who's going to be yours until he turns 18. They're given and then pulled, given and then pulled, given and then pulled, and they're switched around every few months, and it's a complete disaster. And we get into what I think about the government and their foster care system and what I think would be a better alternative, but saying that we have to act like two men are an appropriate environment for children to be given to is like
Yes.
the false dichotomy is amazing. It's like, no,
Yeah, what's
that's
the
not
false
how any
dichotomy?
of this works.
What's the false
The false
dichotomy?
dichotomy is either the crappy foster care system or homosexuals. That's a false
That's
dichotomy.
not a false dichotomy because there are tons of
Yes, it
children
is.
who aren't placed in
We
housing
could
and they
do
would have
better.
tons of loving
We
couples
can do
that would
better.
take care
We
of
can
them.
do
There
better.
is no
We
false
can do
dichotomy.
better.
This is why these companies are being sued for discrimination because they're discriminating because they're self-righteous in saying that
We
you're
should
better off
we should have the
alone
right
than
to
with two
discriminate.
loving parents.
We should have the right to
You should have the
discriminate.
right to prevent children from being with parents that would love them and take care of them.
We should have the right to prevent children given to perverts who are going to sexually abuse them.
Oh, you think they're perverts that are going to sexually abuse them?
There's a huge overlap between pedophiles and homosexual men.
Didn't you
The
say you're in
rate
the
of
Catholic Church?
no,
You
I'm
want
not
to?
Catholic. I said that I deviated from the Catholic Church on something, but I'm not Catholic. But I'm kind of
Okay.
close to being Catholic.
Oh god,
Um,
that's gonna be like a huge, huge irony right
it's
there.
factually it's that I mean honestly that's why I haven't joined the Catholic Church properly.
So like you're
So
you're
it's
just
that's not
fine
an
with a
irony.
little bit of the pedophilia from the priests, right?
No, I'm not. I mean, that's why I have not joined the Catholic Church. I do not tithe to them because the
Would it be
Vatican
better
is
for kids
corrupt.
to be in the Catholic Church or no church?
A church that isn't corrupted with
Would yeah, would
homosexuality.
it be better for the children to be in the Catholic Church or no church?
I don't know. I don't know like the statistics of like I hope that now they've rooted out the problem and that they're not just shuffling around these pedophile priests. I would have to look into it more, but this is why I haven't joined because I
You have a kid
don't
that they say I'm either going to go to the Catholic Church or I'm going to be an atheist. Which should they do?
probably go to the Catholic Church. But this is
Perfect.
a false
Perfect.
dichotomy.
Let's go. Do you think
But
that
this is a false
do you
dichotomy.
think that the children should be with the gay couple or they should be in the foster care system? There's only one couple that's willing to adopt them. It's the gay couple. Should they be allowed to adopt?
That's a false dichotomy.
Do you think that there's no case where this is going to happen?
I think that there are. No, I don't think that's the case where
You
that's
don't
going
you
to
don't
happen
think
because
there's a
there's
case
long
where
wait lists.
like only gay
They.
couples are willing to adopt certain
This
children?
is why they have to sue and shut down the Christian adoption agencies to stop them from discriminating against gay people, or else gay people wouldn't get their victims handed to
It's
them
not
by the
victims.
state's
It's the
foster care
fact that
system.
children are going to
Yeah,
be left
a lot of
alone
them
in the
are
foster
victims.
care system.
A lot of them are
Yeah,
victims,
and
and
there's
a
a lot of
lot
victims that go to
a
the
lot of the
Catholic
foster
Church,
parents.
right? There's a lot of victims
Yeah,
of like straight
yeah,
Christian couples that get adopted too, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so we're stopping Christians from getting their victims when we let them go to gay couples instead.
no.
Yes,
There's
you
a
just said
huge
that
overlap.
there's a huge number of Christian couples
Statistically,
that adopt. They're going to sexually abuse their children.
statistically, there is a huge overlap between men who have sex with other men and identify as gay and pedophiles.
You know
There
what?
is
There's
a
also a huge overlap
strong
between
culture
men
in
who have
that
sex with
community
women and identify as heterosexual and pedophiles. There's a huge overlap because
per
men are
capita
predominantly pedophiles,
per
or going to
per
be the predominant
capita
rates of pedophiles are men.
per capita. Men who identify as homosexual are going to be way more likely to be pedophiles than men who identify as
What's the
heterosexual.
difference in the per
And
capita
you can see
rates?
this is, remember when Milo got canceled
Yeah, what's the difference in
because
the
he
per
was
capita
making
rates?
light? I don't know. I'd have to look it up. Do you remember when Milo got canceled
Oh yeah, I remember
because he was
Milo
making
canceled.
light of um the pedophilia in the homosexual community?
Oh
Like
yeah, and
this
remember who
is
kept embracing Milo? Remember who's trying to bring Milo back? What religion they're a part of? I don't think it's the gays that are claiming Milo. I'm pretty sure it's the Catholics that are claiming Milo right now, right?
no one's claiming Milo right now.
America
He
First
got
is really
canceled by
claiming
the right.
Milo.
He got canceled by the
America
right.
First is claiming Milo really now.
They are government agents. They are not real people with real like Nick Fuentes is not a real person. I mean, he's like a person,
Is
but
Nick
like
Fuentes
he's
in the
a
room
government
with you right
agent.
now?
He's a government agent. No, like the number of actual fascists is like very small, and he doesn't like. Didn't Milo and Nick Fuentes have a falling
You
out?
know what else is another
Milo's
really small number? The amount of gay men that are pedophiles. So why should we deny them from being one?
it's not a small
It is a
number.
really small number.
It's not a
It
small
is a really
number.
small number. What's the number then?
I don't know. Look it up. Oh, if you ask Chat GPT, it won't tell you.
Oh yeah.
That's a hate fact.
Yeah, so what's the number then? Considering you're saying like it's not a small number, you should have like an idea of what the number is, right?
We can look it up.
Oh yeah, apparently you know the number because you're able to make references to the number. You should at least be able to give
I've
like a rough
looked it
idea.
up before. I don't have it memorized.
Yeah, what you
I
know
don't
the
have it
numbers
written on
that
the
I
back of
looked
my
up and the
hand.
numbers I referenced, I was able to tell you, right? I was able to tell you what the number was when I asked you what the
What
difference in
number?
birth rate is. I knew that number off the top of my head because I actually saw the number. If I was like making something up and I was bullshitting, I would tell you like, yeah, I don't remember the number. Like I forgot the number. I forgot like even an idea of the number. I'm not. You don't need to tell me the exact one.
I'm sorry, I'm not enough of a debate, bro. I guess I should keep like a file open with all of my facts
I
and
don't have a
statistics.
file open right now.
Okay.
I have my own
I'm
stream
more
open.
interested. I'm more interested in theory than these like statistics because statistics can be played with anyway, and I mean you can get a study to say whatever you want it to say.
Okay, so like,
So
what's the theory behind should we allow gay people to adopt if we're not going to go with a statistical argument against it?
because they're perverts.
Again, you're requiring statistics to do that. What makes gay people perverts?
Um, a man having sex with another man is against the natural order because you
No.
cannot produce children.
You can still
The
raise children.
the penis was made to impregnate a woman. It was not made to be inserted into a rectum. That is a perverted use of the sexual function. Is using it for an unintended purpose. And there are consequences to that. Spreading disease. We have the AIDS epidemic in America because of sodomy, and it causes harm to the men's phys- physically over time, and it can't produce children. And then we pretend like they can get married, but marriage is a specific thing that involves the birthing and raising of children, and two men cannot do that. So then
Sure, they
they
can
have
raise the
to.
children that are left by the straight couples that don't do that, right?
So a lot of them now are doing what Dave Rubin and Pete Buttigieg
They're
did
also getting surrogacy, yeah.
of buying eggs, hiring a surrogate, and then hiring nannies and buying breast milk and doing all these things and creating children with no mother. And this definitely goes against the natural order. And I even thought back in the day when I was an atheist, I thought that Christians were crazy when they talked about the slippery slope. I thought, oh, what are they talking about? It's fine. Just let people do what they want. And it was has not been very long since the legalizing of gay marriage. And now we're manufacturing babies. And they can't even have the babies one at a time. They're so narcissistic. They have to get a pair of twins, one
I thought you
being
were
the father of each
pro-natalist. Isn't
one.
it better that they're doing this together?
No, no, you should not be hiring women in third world countries to give you their eggs and to be a surrogate and all of that. We should follow the natural order and have a man married to a woman and get pregnant the natural way. We should not be using money to basically buy mail order children.
They're not by mail order children. They're people that wouldn't have had children otherwise be able to have children and raise them in a loving home. Isn't
How
that a
is
good
that
thing?
not mail order children?
By the fact that you're not mail ordering them.
You go fly there, pick them up, and bring them back. They're not shipped in the mail, but it's really
So like
close.
if it's like a neighbor, would it be fine for like my neighbor's my surrogate then?
If they're no,
It's like it wouldn't. It's not the fact that it's like mail order children. Then it's like you have an idea of the issue underlying it.
I wanted to be like, well, it might be okay if it's like your sister and like you have fertility problems, she's doing you a favor. But then I'm like, you know what? No, we can't budge on this at all. We can't if we budge on it an inch, they'll take a mile. So no,
Okay,
absolutely not.
sure.
None of it. No IVF. No,
What do you
absolutely not.
consider a big number then? Like what percent of gay people would be pedophiles would be like a big number? Would like 5% be a big number?
Yeah,
5% would be a big number.
yeah,
4% would that be a big number?
yeah,
3% would that be a big number?
yeah,
2% would that be a big number?
yeah,
1% would that be a big number?
yeah.
0.1% would that be a big number?
No.
0.5% would that be a big number?
Yes.
A 0.25% would that be a big number? 0.25%?
What's the point? It's more than 1% of men are of homosexual men are
One
pedophiles.
percent's a big number. Okay, so you understand that's going to be like you're saying that a big number of straight people are also pedophiles, right?
Oh yeah, way too many straight men are
I
also
agree.
pedophiles.
One person being a pedophile is too many. A big
Right.
number of them being pedophiles is different than like too many being pedophiles, though, right? Because like 0.1%'s not a big number of that group being pedophiles, but that's too many of them being pedophiles.
Okay, let's look at it this way. The chances of a child being molested by their own biological father is not zero. I know somebody
Yes,
who
it's not
was a
zero.
victim like this. It's not zero, but it's much lower than basically any other arrangement. If you have stepfather, if you
Yeah,
have
a straight
boyfriends
stepfather is the
coming in and out,
highest correlation you're going to get for sexual abuse rates of children. That's by far the
I,
highest.
I know that stepfathers are statistically very dangerous. I don't know what that is compared to two adopted fathers, foster fathers, whatever you want to call them, two men who are homosexual, who have gone out of their way to get children
Would
that
it
are
be
not
okay if they get
biologically
a
related
daughter
to
then?
them.
Would it be okay if they get a
What?
daughter? Would it be okay if those two gay men get a daughter?
That might be safer, but I still don't approve of it.
It's like, would you rather that daughter be raised in the foster care system or by those two gay parents?
By their parents.
They're in the foster care system already. The only couple that they have available are like gay couples. So those are the only ones that are willing to take
That
care of the
this is
child.
not how society works. We have to go all the way back and look at how that child was conceived, under what circumstances. If we increase the marriage rate, if we teach people not to
She was
have,
born in marriage. Both those parents died in a plane crash or something. She
then the
survived.
next of kin should take the
All
child.
the
The
entire family. They don't know the
grandparents, the
family.
aunts and
All the rest
uncles.
of the family died of like the plague.
Then the cousin. Then the
The
second
entire
cousin.
family died of the plague. They were like the only child of an only child of an only child of an only child. You'd have to go like 10 degrees out, and the closest relative is actually a gay couple.
You know what? You can do what you want in your society and see how that works for you.
It's working pretty well here so far, right?
You think this is working
Yeah,
well?
since we started to allow gay people to adopt, it's been significantly better.
Do you know how many children are sexually abused?
Not exactly. I know about the number of sex offenders registered in the US, though.
The more we normalize
How many registered
men,
sex offenders do you think are in the US?
I don't know. The number, the more we normalize men
Do you know about how many
raising
of those are going to
children.
be like gay couples doing that?
What?
Do you even have
I
like
don't
a
know.
generalized idea of how many of those are going to be gay couples sexually assaulting the children they're raising?
I don't have numbers off the top of my head. And it's not because we're talking about the principle of the thing, right? We're talking
You asked
about
me,
things.
do I know how many children are sexually assaulted? You're not asking about the principle, then you're asking about the numbers.
Oh, I didn't mean that literally. I meant it's way too many. Way too many children are being sexually assaulted.
I agree.
And
We should
girls
take them out
are
of the Catholic Church. We should take them away from stepfathers. Women should marry other women once they get divorced with kids. That's the way to keep them safe.
You might have a point there.
I agree. They should be in the LGBT couple camps.
Lesbians are very different. I have no problem with lesbians. But what? There's no problem.
I agree.
There.
Let's go.
There's no problem there. I'm also okay with polygamy.
Okay, Rachel's going to be mad about this one now.
I think maybe we should bring back one man and multiple wives. Not every man needs to be having children. Anyway, I forgot what I was going to say before about. I totally lost my train of thought. I got distracted by lesbians.
There's so many jokes to be made right here. I'm going to skip them all in lieu of trying to be nice, okay? What do you think is going to be like the symmetry breaker between lesbians and gay couples?
Lesbians don't spread disease. They can't get pregnant by themselves. So
gay couples can't get pregnant by themselves either.
Oh yeah, but I meant like out of wedlock sex like isn't really that big a deal between
gay
two
marriage
women.
then is going to be like a good thing too, right? It's going to like reduce the amount of men that are going to be like gay and spreading disease. Is like you're encouraging monogamy. That's going to be a social thing that's going to try and lead them to that.
Married gay men are rarely monogamous.
They're more.
You think a piece of paper is
monogamous? What? Do you think the
I
majority
think
of
you need to
gay
look up
men are polygamous?
They are not monogamous.
Do you think the majority of gay men that are married are going to be polygamous? Do you think that's going to be an over 50%
Not monogamous,
number?
yes.
You don't even think the number's going to go down?
It's very rare.
You don't think the number of like non-married gay people are
married gay couples might have bigger a higher possibility of being monogamous than a single gay man, but they are rarely monogamous even when they get married. Sure. They have even if it just a very high number of sexual partners.
Even if it just increases the rate of monogamy, that's going to lower the rate of disease spread, right?
Well, maybe we should make something for them. Like what's it called?
Like our legal idea of marriage, because we have a legal concept of marriage, right?
A domestic partnership, right?
We also have a legal concept of marriage that's like not church based, right?
Okay, I'm a libertarian. I don't want a coercive government having anything to do with marriage. I don't want them recognizing
we
marriage.
already
I don't
are.
want
So
them
like,
doing
as long as
divorce
we have
courts.
marriage, it should apply to gay people. But like, we should get rid of that, right? Would that be
No,
the
I
position?
would rather see us getting rid of legal marriage than recognizing same-sex
Yes.
sex
So like,
marriages because
as
that
long
makes
as we
marriage
don't do
meaningless.
that, it should be like open to them too, right? Until we get rid of it in a legal
No,
sense.
no,
Okay, so why should
because
it be
that's not
same gender as
marriage.
long as we have it there in a
Why
legal
do we have
sense?
marriage? What's the point of marriage?
The point of marriage is to encourage social bonding and monogamy to be able to stabilize
Nope.
family structures.
Family structures. Okay, where are
Yeah.
these children coming from?
Adoption or surrogacy.
Mm-mm. No thanks.
Adoption, surrogacy, yeah. I think it's
Nope.
better to have those children be adopted than to be left alone.
I think it's better that they not be adopted by same-sex couples. And it's
Yeah.
not marriage. If you can't produce children, it's not marriage.
So like, if you're an infertile woman, you're not married when you're married to a guy.
A married couple, a heterosexual married couple without children, it's not quite the same thing as
Sure.
a marriage with children. It's not really the same thing. You're just playing house.
Sure, there are people that have been like child sexual assault victims that were so young that they lose the ability to have children because of the damage caused to their bodies. Are they then unable to be married because they're victims
Aren't
of sexual
unable to have
assault?
children.
So are they unable to be married because they're unable to have children?
They're able to get married because because when a man and a woman have sex, there's a possibility that they could get pregnant, and we
No,
don't know for
she
sure who's
literally cannot.
infertile or not.
Like she had to
We
get a
don't.
hysterectomy, an entire hysterectomy from it because of the damage caused.
We have created the institution of marriage for men and women to have sex in a social structure that if the woman gets pregnant, everybody knows what to do. The man is saying, I am obligated. If you get pregnant, I'm going to take care of you and that child. And it's a contract between the man and woman, and usually their family and their community is involved. And different societies have different cultural norms about that, but the purpose is for the children. If a couple can't have children, that is very unfortunate. But the reason for the marriage is for the possible children.
Yeah, so if it's
We know
impossible
that
for them to have children,
same-sex children, same-sex partners cannot have children. So it would be completely useless for them to get married.
in
Now
situations
we
where a woman
might
had a
hold on.
hysterectomy, would that be
Hold on.
possible?
Now we might know that someone is infertile, and we might know that for 100% sure. But we're not going to change the institution of marriage to say infertile people can't get married,
If you're
because
saying the
that
institution
doesn't
is
really make much
for
sense.
children, that wouldn't be changing the institution then, though.
What?
If you're saying the institution is for people with the possibility of children, that wouldn't be changing the institution then. You'd be using the same institution. You're actually
But if there
changing the
is no
institution
possibility
by
of
letting them do
children,
that. Yeah, when they had a hysterectomy, they're infertile 100% of the time. When you do that, you're changing the institution by letting them get married then.
no.
Then the institution isn't about the possibility of having children.
In general, it is.
Then
We're not going to.
so in general,
Wait, hold on a second.
yeah,
Hold on a
then
second.
you
Hold
can
on.
apply that to gay
We're
people.
not going to take people and give them tests to see if they're fertile before they can get married. We're not going to do that. That's ridiculous, right? But we don't need to do that when it comes to same-sex couples, because we know for 100% certainty that those two people cannot have a child together.
What if one looks really feminine, one's like a femboy,
It,
or really
now we're
passing
getting
trans
into
women?
trans.
Yeah, if
Now
one
we're getting into trans.
no, they're not trans. They just look really feminine. Like you look at them and you're like,
It doesn't
that's a
matter what you
woman.
look like.
Then
It
how else
matters
are
what
you
you
going to know?
are.
Is like the priest going to give them a genital check beforehand
The doctor does a genital check when you're born, and it's put on
when
your
you're
birth
married?
certificate, male or female, when you're born. When you're born, the doctor puts it on the birth
Okay,
certificate, male
I
or
filled out my
female.
driver's license with female now. Can I marry a guy?
No,
I have
because you can't change your sex.
I have the flag behind me to provide extra reference. I'm
You
going to identify as a woman from now on. Can I marry a guy?
I don't think that you should be able to marry a guy because you can't change your sex.
You're right. I can change what's on my driver's license. I can change whatever documentation that it's on. Whether that corresponds to like an
So,
underlying biological reality, the thing they check is going to say female then.
so
Because the thing they're
I
checking
don't
when they
think that
say this is okay
I
is
don't
going to
think
say
that you should
female.
be able to do that. I don't think that you should be able to change your sex on your driver's license. It should be based upon your birth certificate.
So okay, the doctor was wrong then. The doctor put the wrong thing actually on my birth certificate. They were really drunk. They had a spelling mistake. It
Okay,
looked
then you can fix it.
no. It still says that though. Like I'm not trying to fix it. And does that change what I'm allowed to do then? Who I'm allowed to marry?
We Are you talking about an individual circumstance or are you talking about a policy? Because if we're talking about policy, we don't go, well, if the doctor was drunk and put down the
If we're
wrong
talking about an
sex on your.
individual circumstance, I think gay people should be allowed to get married too. Like that's going to fall under the heuristic breaking rule, where we say that this is going to be a generalized statement of what marriage is for, but it's not going to always be the case. It's also going to be used to enforce other things, and that
It
these
doesn't
other
need to
things are going to be
always
valued
be
on
the
gay
case
people.
in order for that to be the function of the institution.
That's why it's a
Just
heuristic.
because it's not true in every single case doesn't mean that that's not the purpose of the institution.
That's why I said
But
it's a
if we
heuristic, not a
say that
categorical.
people who are same sex can get married, we are changing the institution of marriage to mean completely something other than children. Or we allow same sex couples to adopt and to do surrogacy and to do whatever and to get mail order babies with no mother, which I am very much against. So, because I'm against gay couples doing surrogacy, I'm against gay marriage. You understand?
What if it turned out that gay couples doing surrogacy was actually better for children? We had more children, their average quality of life was higher. We had both. Like it actually turned out that we raise it to the point where you have exactly 2 births per gay couple because they're both getting surrogacy of twins at the same time because they're all egomaniacs. We have a higher birth rate than the average population, as well as the outcomes are going to be higher because they're going to be more stabilized and are going to be a better quality of life because they're going to be able to afford the surrogacy in the first place.
So, we're going to have a society where poor women are paid to be pregnant for gay couples and then giving up their children. And then other poor women are going to be hired to be nannies for these children by these wealthy gay men. Like, do you hear how deranged that
Do
is?
you know one of
That
the
is so
qualifications you need
perverted.
for surrogacy?
What?
Do you know one of the qualifications you need for surrogacy?
For being the
A
sperm
surrogate, yeah.
donor or for
For
being
being
a
a surrogate,
surrogate?
for being a surrogate mother, yeah.
You need to be able to carry a healthy
You
pregnancy.
need to have already had a child. You need to have,
Right.
yeah, that's one of the main qualifiers for it. So you're going to
Right.
see situations where parents are going to be in very hard situations to raise their child where they're going to have to make those hard decisions, or they're going to be extra happy to do those things. Which of those situations do you feel like they shouldn't be doing? Should they not be doing whatever they can to better the situation for their own child? Or should they not be willing to help another family unit who wants to have children when they're willing to, when they're already in a good situation? Because those are the only 2 cases where you're going to be able to have this applied.
I think that these women's husbands should go get a job and support them.
Yeah, they're struggling to make it because the economic situation is really bad.
And fix the economic situation. The answer is not to turn women into children
So
baby factories
okay,
for
so as
gay
long as
men.
like the mother's in a good spot, then that she just wants to help out this couple, does that make it okay?
No.
So then it's not going to be anything about like those poor women, because the woman wants to do this. That's like her close friends that she's known for her entire life. She wants to help them have the child that they will always love. She's not
Okay,
allowed to do that.
let me give you a scenario in the future if we follow your social norms, because we can't just think about the individual circumstance. We have to think about the long-term effects to society. Okay, so one day we have corporations that buy sperm from sperm donors, buy eggs from egg donors, hire women to be surrogates, and then raise these children that are property, not well, that are the children of the corporation, like the corporation is their guardian and raises them to be obedient to the corporation. And oh yeah, because transing kids is legal, we're going to brainwash them into thinking that into becoming gender confused and give them puberty blockers. And then when they turn 18 and are of age but they still look like children because they've been on puberty blockers, we the corporation uses them as prostitutes because that's legal too. And so they're the corporation that also uh, is their parent is pimping them out as 18-year-olds that look like children. That how do you think that would that be a society you would want to live in?
Because my original point was always that corporations are the same as individuals. Corporations have the same exact rights as individuals. That was my
Whether
position. That was what you
whether
need.
corporation
That's your baked in assumption there, right?
okay, whether corporations do it or whoever does it, if it's a single man who's very rich decides to do this, would you want to live in that society where that's normal
Where a
and
single
that's
man is
considered
hiring,
acceptable?
there's going to be a situation of child abuse where you're going to end up being able to diagnose people that don't have gender dysphoria and provide medication for that.
Oh, they have gender dysphoria.
Okay, if they are diagnosed with gender dysphoria, which is a very low alternate rate, they're not going to be always on puberty blockers. You understand that, right?
They can be on puberty blockers until they're 18,
You
from the
don't do
time they're
that,
12 to
actually. You
18.
don't do puberty blockers for 6 years. Puberty blockers are a very temporary
Some
measure
people
that
have
you.
done that.
It's very rare. You don't do that. That's not
Nope.
how puberty
No, it's not.
blockers are done.
No, it's not. Yeah, it is.
No, it's not. You end up doing
They
cross
usually
sex
go on
hormones.
cross-sex hormones, but
Yeah, that's not
they
a
you don't
puberty
have to.
blocker then. Cross sex hormones are inducing puberty of the other sex.
That's not what I said.
That is exactly what you said.
I said they usually go on cross-sex hormones, but there's no requirement to. There
Once
are
you're not on
there
puberty
are
blockers for
children
6 years.
there are children right now in 2023 where this trans stuff is still fairly new, where children have been on puberty blockers from the age of 12 to 18.
Who do you think pimps
So,
out their kids more? Straight couples with daughters who, as soon as they turn 18, do that to them? Or gay couples who adopted like a 7-year-old because no one else would?
what?
Who do you think is going to be more likely to pimp out their child? A straight couple with a daughter or a
Who's
gay
more likely
couple?
to what their child?
Do your idea of like pimping out your child. You're turning them into a little
Oh,
prostitute as soon as they turn 18.
we have lots of examples of gay couples pimping out their adopted sons well before they turn 18.
And we have a ton more examples of straight couples
Yeah.
doing that to their daughters, right? That's
Hmm.
not a symmetry breaker then? You want to live in a world where we're like having straight couples pimp out their daughters as soon as they turn
No,
18?
because it's not socially acceptable. I don't think
Yeah,
it
it's not
should
socially
be
acceptable for gay
acceptable.
couples to pimp out their children either, right? We can both agree
But if
pimping out your children is
but
bad.
it
This should not be an
but if
acceptable
we
thing.
but if we normalize prostitution after the age of 18, what could possibly be wrong with that?
Because
If
you're
an
pimping out
18-year-old
your
chooses to
child.
do that,
Yeah, if the 18-year-old chooses to do that, the issue is the
what?
grooming beforehand, right?
Oh, the grooming beforehand. So, like,
Yeah,
if you
like
socialize your
when the
child,
parents are grooming their daughters into being a
so when you
prostitute.
socialize your child to think that it's okay to perform in porn, to be a sex worker, to have sex before marriage, and but you don't do it until they're 18, which is basically what society is doing to children right now.
Yeah, I know Christian parents do this to their children a lot. They fuck up their children's idea
So,
of sex a lot.
what do you mean they fuck up their children's idea of sex?
And
What
there's a
idea
reason
of sex?
you put the idea of sex into your daughters to the point where they end up being hyper repressed. This is what we see a lot of Christian girls end up going to
It's
OnlyFans.
it's oppression. What? What?
Repressed. R with an R. R-E-P.
What is wrong with repression?
What is
There's
wrong with
nothing
repression?
wrong with repression. This is just one of those
It's
social norms.
trivially bad that repressing things is bad.
No,
It is
no,
trivially bad. What do you
it
mean?
is. It is not bad to repress things. Like, you shouldn't do everything that you are tempted to do.
You're
It
right.
is good to
Suppressing
repress.
things is bad. Repressing things is suppressing
What's
things
the
is not bad.
difference? What's the
One of
difference?
those things is you're stopping an urge. One of those things is you're hiding ideas and thoughts that are going to end up biting you back. That's why it's trivially true that repressing things is
It
bad.
doesn't bite you back. This idea is from Freud. It's complete bullshit. The culture has bought onto this idea that it's wrong to repress sexuality. It's not. It's how it should be done. When you have a sexual feeling that is not appropriate, you should repress it. And it doesn't come back to bite you. If that was true, we would see uh we would see less sexual problems, compulsive behavior now than before, when sexual repression was the culture norm. Now that the idea is that you shouldn't repress your sexuality, we should be seeing less compulsive sexual behavior, but we see the opposite.
What we see is we see a lot of sexual behavior that ends up happening when people are adults. We don't see a lot of pedophilia now, less than we do then. We actually saw a lot more pedophilia beforehand. What?
I
We
mean, maybe you can find some study that says that, but
we've
I
it's not just
I'm
gonna be
going to
saying
have to
violent
question.
crime rates have been going down consistently over the past millennia.
Yeah.
It's also correlated with like pedophilia too. The issue is we just defined pedophilia differently 500 years ago. We said it's okay to fuck a 14-year-old because that's the way God wanted it to be.
If a 14-year-old marries an 18-year-old.
It was an 18-year-old, it was a 40-year-old. It was a 35-year-old. It was a 30-year-old. We saw this is
I'm
we
not saying
saw.
everything in the past was great and perfect. Like, I
No,
feel like we
you're saying
are
that like this we should
as
go back to those standards that led to those things while saying that like gay people are pedophiles, but you don't even know like roughly the rate at which gay people will be pedophiles. You can't even tell me a number. You said like a
I've
quarter of a
looked it up
percent
in
would
the
be a
past.
large
In
number.
the past, I've been thinking about this. I looked it up. I found a gay guy who researches this online, and I read his stuff like he's some sort of academic, and I looked at it, and even though he was a gay man, he was like, this is the per capita blah 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 blah. I don't remember what the exact number was, but I
Yeah, I'm not
remember
asking
it was
for
much
a
higher than for
per
hetero.
capita
Can I
number,
finish
an
a
exact
sentence?
number.
Can I finish a sentence?
I'm letting you finish sentences. The issue is you ramble. You take 5 sentences
I'm
at a
not
time.
talking that much.
If you think that, I don't know what to tell you then.
Okay, fine. I don't know why we're having a conversation if you're not going to let me finish a sentence.
I've let you
I
finish
don't
entire
interrupt you.
sentences.
Am I interrupting you?
You've interrupted me repeatedly. I just let you talk when you
Well,
do.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. That's how normal people have conversations. You interject on the contentious point where they're building their long ramble out of something that you disagree on
It
beforehand.
wasn't a long ramble. I was finishing my point. But you don't want me to make my point because
Make your
you don't
point.
want to hear it, because you
Make your
keep saying
point.
this over and over and over
Yeah,
again.
because you're missing my
Oh,
point.
you don't know the statistic.
Because
You
you're
don't know
missing
the
my point.
statistic. I'm telling you, I looked into it and I saw that the rate for pedophilia for homosexual men was much higher than for heterosexual men. And I stored that in the memory bank. I don't remember the exact number. We can look it up later. Okay, I want to go back to my scenario that I was talking about before. Do you want to live in that kind of society where puberty blockers for children is normalized and transing of children is normalized and sex work is normalized and surrogacy is normalized and all of this? Do you want to live in that society? Does that sound like fun?
Do you know what the idea of when you start listing out multiple points that are really weak in an attempt to like not have
That
to defend either of them is
they
called?
weren't multiple points. I was
Weren't you
giving
just
you
telling
an
me how you
example
were
of a
letting me finish my
society.
sentences? And then you just interrupt
but
me on the next
but
sentence?
that's not what I said.
But then you interrupt me on the next sentence because you interjected on the point that you disagreed with at the beginning of my
Because
sentence I was
that's
going to
not
build
what
my
I
next
said.
sentence out
I
of.
wasn't
Yeah,
making
right?
multiple
You just did
points.
exactly what I said. You did. You went through your first point, which was you saying that you don't know the exact number. I'm not asking for the exact number. I'm asking for a rough estimate of what you think that number even would be. Just ballpark it. That's what I asked you for repeatedly. You keep misframing as me asking you for the exact number. Then you went on to, do you want this society where you bake in like
I'm
7
not gonna
different
ballpark.
assumptions?
I'm not gonna ballpark.
You're not even.
I'm not gonna say
You're
something
vague
unless I
posting.
know exactly what it is.
So you're
But
just vague posting.
I know that it's higher than for heterosexual
Okay, I
men.
know it's lower than. There we go.
And for gay couples, there's two men, not just one.
Yeah,
There's
I know it's
two.
lower
So
then.
you have double the chance.
I know it's lower because gay people are just going to be less likely to abuse children then. It's like I've seen the numbers too. It's just less likely.
No, I disagree. That's not what I saw.
Yeah, it's not what I saw either. How do we get past this point then?
And it makes no sense.
It makes a lot of sense. How do we get past this point?
Mm-mm. Do you want to live in a society with where your social norms are taken to their logical conclusion?
Yeah, I'd love to live in a society where my social norms are taken to a logical conclusion because one of those social norms is pedophilia is bad and grooming children is bad. Trying to manipulate children and how they think is a bad thing to do, which is why I'm generally against organized religion.
How do you even raise children without manipulating what they think? You would be able to not tell them anything about anything.
No, you provide them a large range of different ideas and you give them different opportunities to experience different concepts. You don't try and lock them into one thing and try and punish them if they don't think a certain way.
You shouldn't punish them if they don't think a certain way, but it's the idea of an education devoid of values is impossible.
You can implement values in different value systems. I don't think the only value then is going to be able to be implementing Christian deontology. I think you can implement different value systems and teach them about those. I think most children should have a very basic, and when they're like teens, should have a very basic understanding of the three main normative ethical systems. You should very quickly learn what deontology is, what virtue ethicism is, and what consequentialism is. I don't think just teaching them one thing and having them fumble on meta ethics all the time and trip their way through anything and be unable to actually justify any position is a good way to raise children with values.
Okay, so a society that adopts that idea is not going to be able to maintain itself. Because cultural evolution works by the parents teaching the children their culture and continuing on in that fashion. And so you wouldn't be able to have a long lasting culture through the generations. It would just be whatever sounded good. And so ideologies wouldn't compete based upon which worked better. It would just be based upon whichever sounded good to the new generation that doesn't know anything.
Cultural evolution doesn't happen by its repeating of itself. That's cultural stagnation. Cultural evolution comes by adding in different ideas to the next generation, by teaching them different things and letting them parse out what's going to be the best thing through their life and when they go to their children and their children go to their children. This is a way that's actually going to evolve into a better culture because you're going to have over generations, you're going to have an increasing amount of people understanding the baseline systems and being able to actually learn to implement them. Having a stagnant system.
In order to have cultural evolution, you have to teach your children your culture, but obviously there's going to be variations. Things are going to change over time, hopefully at a slow enough rate that it's not going to completely become dysfunctional. That's a problem with how fast our culture has been changing through the generations, is that we've made our society dysfunctional and it no longer serves its purpose. And so if you have a culture that doesn't teach their children their culture, they just teach this very like try to be neutral and teach everything, then you're not even passing down your cultural values onto the next generation. That's like if you can't have evolution if the parents don't pass down their genes to their children.
You're passing that down. You're passing down other information as well. You're not passing down every bit of information except your culture. That's not like a part you're leaving out. You're passing down your culture and you're passing down other things as well. And your children, if that culture is valuable, are generally going to adopt that culture. If it's not valuable, they're not going to. That's how you have
So
cultural
it's
evolution.
so you're okay with indoctrinating children, but not too much.
Did I say indoctrinating children there? Or did I
Well,
say you
what's the
can
difference
complete.
between indoctrination and teaching children your values?
Because teaching them your values alone and only having them know your values is going to be indoctrination. Only teaching them that little set of information is indoctrination. Teaching them that plus other values, other systems is not indoctrination.
Actually, the best way to indoctrinate people is to not only teach them your ideology, but to teach them how bad the other ideologies are and teach them arguments against the other ideology.
Is that what I said? Or are you shadowboxing right now?
Well, you said that you should teach them other ideologies. So if
Yeah, do you
I
know
have
do
an
you know the symmetry
education
breaker of what you
system,
just said from what I said?
so if I teach my children my values and I also teach them other ideologies, but I teach them in such a way that I make them look really bad,
Do you think that
that is
was
still
do you think that was
indoctrination.
the essence of what I was going with, or are you purposely trying to strawman me?
I'm trying
Like,
to make the
yeah, do you
argument that there's no
genuinely
such
think that that was
thing.
what I was trying to say? Is that you're teaching that, but in a
Yes,
bad
yes,
way?
I
You thought I
I
was trying to say you
genuinely
teach them the
I
other systems negatively? That was what you thought
no,
the essence of my point was?
I think that what you're saying is that you shouldn't indoctrinate children. You should teach them everything. And I'm saying there's no such thing. There's no
I
ability
don't
to
think you
do
should teach them
that
anything. I think you
because
should teach them
everybody has
multiple
a
things.
bias.
Yeah, I think you should teach them
Yeah,
multiple
and
things
when
as
you
best as
teach those
possible.
other things, when you teach them those other things, you are going to teach them in a biased way because people are biased. There's
Yeah,
no
you
such
might, which
thing
is why you
as
should
an
have multiple people
unbiased.
teaching them. That's why I think homeschooling is generally a bad thing.
It doesn't matter how many people are doing it. There's going to be a bias. Everybody has a bias. And if you have a group of people, they probably have their own bias.
Yeah, that's why you try and compensate by adding outsiders to that group. You try and
Why
add
should
other
we
things.
compensate for that? Why is indoctrination bad?
Why is indoctrination bad? Why is indoctrination
Yeah.
bad? I mean, if
What's
you
wrong
want to
with
take the idea that
indoctrination?
trying to groom your child into a specific way of thinking isn't going to be a bad thing, go for it. I think it's going to be very self evident that if you're trying to manipulate what children think to get your ends actualized, it's generally going to be a pretty bad heuristic to set.
There's no such thing as raising a child or educating a child without that.
Yeah, you do your best to compensate and not have that happen. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect. I'm
That's not
saying you
something that
try to.
actually happens.
You're right. I don't
You
think
can
it
try
actually
to, but you're not
happens.
going to succeed.
I don't
You're
think
not
it would
going to
happen with you.
succeed.
I agree.
And I don't know why you would even try.
Because you're generally going to try and have your children have a better understanding. If you genuinely think that your ideas are the best ideas, then it would
Right.
be very likely that your children would agree with them, right?
Hopefully.
It would be very
It really
likely unless your
depends.
children are like really stupid.
And not necessarily stupid, but it has to do with the influences
Your children
that
Okay, so your children are just really
influences
easily
them.
manipulatable, so you have to be the one manipulating them.
Everybody is very easily manipulatable.
No, most people aren't very easily manipulatable. A lot of people do this thing where they're like, I'm not very easily manipulatable, but everyone else is. Most people
Everybody
aren't.
is.
No, most people are very hard to manipulate. Most people get really defensive and stuck in their ways.
Um Over time, young people are easy to manipulate than older people, but even old people are very easy to manipulate if given enough time. If they're sitting in front of that television watching that programming enough hours, they will believe whatever they are told. The vast majority of people do not make decisions based upon facts and evidence and reason like we try to pretend. We make decisions based upon emotion and very often what the people around us that we have social bonds with agree with because we want to fit in with the crowd, the vast majority of people.
Yes.
And so the idea that we shouldn't teach our children our culture and to call it indoctrination is absolutely insane because I want my children to have the best life possible. And I have more experience than my children do. So I have spent a lot of time trying to figure things out and developing what I believe. And so I'm going to give that to them and I'm going to tell them about the other ideologies and I'm going to explain why they're wrong and why they shouldn't believe in that because I want my children to have the best life possible. And I want them to continue on to improve themselves and for every generation to be better off than the last.
Look, if your position is children are easily manipulatable, so I have to be the one manipulating them, I can't create like a symmetry breaker between you and any other sort of like grooming pedophile. I think that's going to be like the logical extent that ends up being justified, as long as they think that they're also justified.
So teaching a child anything, like teaching a child don't murder, to you is morally the same as teaching a child to be okay with being sexually abused.
No, I think teaching a child that only my way is okay and everyone else is wrong, and here's why, and that's what you're trying to influence on them, is going to be very similar to how pedophiles are going to do, where you're old enough to do these things. The way this way is like wrong. My way is correct. I think that's a very similar idea.
Everybody thinks that their way is the best way.
Yes.
Obviously, I'm going to teach my children the truth as I see it, which is that my way is the best way that I found, and here's why. Because I want the best for them. The problem with pedophiles grooming children is that they teach children lies for what's best for the predator, not what's best for the child. I teach my children, don't let anybody touch you in your no-no zone. Come run home and tell mom and dad right away. If someone's creeping you out, run away. Like you have bodily autonomy. I teach them that because I want what's best for them, and I teach them not to have sex until they're a little young, but when they're older, not to have sex until they're married because I want what's best for them. If society or a single person or whatever is teaching children that it's okay to have sex outside of marriage, it's okay to be a porn star, it's okay to be a sex worker, even if you're teaching them to do those things when they turn 18, that's teaching them to do things that aren't in their best interest. That's in the best interest of sexual predators or just men who want to get off to 18-year-olds.
If the sexual predator genuinely believes that it's in their child's best interest, does
None
that
of them
justify
do.
it? If someone does,
No,
they're like,
that wouldn't justify it
yeah,
because
they're like
they're
mentally
wrong.
deranged. Yeah, that's gonna be like the truth maker there. What defines your position as being truthful?
Because I am following the tradition that my ancestors followed, that my parents followed, my grandparents followed, my great grandparents followed, all the way back to probably like 1,000, 1,500 plus years ago, back when they converted to Christianity. And that way worked. It wasn't perfect, it was not perfect, but it worked to get us here into the best civilization that has ever existed on the face of the earth. And I don't want to screw that up. I'm going to continue that tradition and making little changes to make it even better. Like when we got rid of slavery, that was good. Keep that one. When we gave rights to women, that was good. Keep that one. But at the point that we were like, yeah, let's normalize birth control, let's normalize abortion. No, that those were not good changes. Let's roll it back because that is causing problems in society. I want a well-functioning society.
It's like, what's the difference maker there between you and someone who just traces their tradition back to Muhammad, so they think it's okay to have sex with 9-year-olds? They're 9-year-old child brides.
Because Christian civilization is better than Muslim civilization
By
because
what
that's
metrics? The
why they're
metrics you're
moving from there
valuing
to
is
here.
showing that Muslim
That's
situations nations are better.
that's that's why they're moving from there to here, and we're not moving from here to there.
Yeah, what metrics do you think that Christian civilizations are
Immigration.
better? You think just immigrating to a country makes it a better country?
That's a very good way to tell. If you look at people and say, "Where do you want to live?" and they're going to be like, "I want to live there." That's probably the best place to live. I mean, maybe there was a good advertising campaign and they're mistaken, but that's a pretty good metrics to use.
It's
I mean,
like if we
all of our perception is subjective. Nothing's objective, but I think that's the best one I've thought of.
it's like we saw a lot of increased immigration when we started implementing these policies around like abortion, right? We had a
That's
lot of
because we
immigration
opened the
after that.
border. That's because we opened the border.
We also had a lot more
Everyone's always
people
wanted
want
to
to
come to
immigrate to our
America.
country during that happening.
What?
As we increased like gay rights, more people wanted to immigrate to our country. As we increased abortion, more people wanted to immigrate to our country.
I think that's just a function of transportation and how easy it is to move around and get information and learn English. A lot of people know English now because of like Hollywood and stuff. And so it's easier for them to assimilate to America.
Do you know what the percentage of the United Arab Emirates are immigrants?
A lot of them, but from other Muslim countries.
88%. Qatar's 77%. Kuwait 73%. Bahrain
Hmm.
is 55%. Oman's 46%. Singapore is
This isn't
43%. Saudi
this
Arabia is
isn't making a
39%.
point.
Jordan's
How many
34%,
how many
Australia's 30%, Switzerland's 29%, New
okay,
Zealand's
how
29%,
many
Lebanon's 25, Israel's
okay,
23,
can you stop?
Canada's
Can you
21,
shut up?
Kazakhstan's
Shut up,
20,
shut up,
Sweden's
shut up.
20,
This is
Austria's
not a
19,
point.
Germany's
This is not a
18,
fucking
Gabon
point.
is 19, Ireland's 18.
Okay.
All
I'm
these
just gonna mute you
countries,
then. Because that's like you're not making a point. You're not making a point
I
because they're
am.
moving from some Muslim countries to a different Muslim
I
countries.
started
There's
listing
differences
non-Muslim
between
countries.
Muslim countries.
I started listing non-Muslim countries.
Where are they coming from?
People in
Where are they
Ireland,
going to?
Ireland's 18% immigrants. Germany's 19.
People are moving from Ireland to the United Arab Emirate.
I didn't. I said these are also countries. Ireland and Germany have higher immigration percentages than
Why are
America
you
does.
listing countries?
Because you said the immigrants are what people wanting to immigrate to those countries, and people immigrating to those countries make it a better country. When we look at the percentage
Right.
that are immigrants, we see that the America's not even top 20.
Because the Muslim country, what was the top country that had the most immigrants?
United Arab
Okay.
Emirates.
They are accepting a lot of immigrants from other countries. And so even worse countries that are often Muslim countries are going to work there.
So we
This
can
is
look at
not the
other
point you think it
countries.
is.
We
What is
can look
the
at countries like,
overall immigration
sure, Australia.
to or from traditionally Christian countries?
Australia is still at
Australia.
30%.
Australia is a Christian country.
Switzerland's 29%. Yeah, these are countries that
Christian
people.
country.
Yeah, but we look at the countries that want to be immigrated to more. It's still Middle Eastern countries. The same criticism
From
you posit.
worse Muslim countries.
Then you're having people from Australia immigrate from worse Christian countries. What do you think this
Go to
icebreaker is?
go to the Arab Emirate and ask them how many of them want to immigrate to a traditionally Christian country.
It's gonna be a low number.
It's gonna be a low number. Okay.
Yeah, they're mostly Muslims. What do you mean?
Plenty of Muslims still come to Christian countries. How many Christians are going to Muslim countries, and how many Muslims are coming to Christian countries?
I don't know how many.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know how many.
You're gonna deny the fact.
I don't know. I'm not denying the fact. I don't know the fact. You sound
You're gonna
confident
deny
in
the
it, so
fact.
hopefully you know the fact here. What is the
You're
fact?
gonna deny the fact that
What
there are
fact?
more Muslims moving to Christian countries than Christians moving to Muslim
I don't
countries.
know the number. I'm asking what the number is since you seem to know it.
Okay,
Do you know
we're
the
not
number?
going to do. Can you cite your sources? For
That's
that?
what you just
It's
asked me to
obviously
do.
True.
You just asked
I
me to
didn't
do
ask
that.
you to do that.
You were like, "Do you know the number?"
It's
I'm like, "No, I don't."
obviously
What's the
true.
number then? I'm asking you the question you just asked
Are
me.
you seriously denying this obvious fact?
No, I'm asking you the question you just asked me. Right? I'm asking
Are
you the
you
same exact
denying this
question. You're
obvious
coping
fact?
about it.
What question did I ask you?
You asked me what's the number of Muslims are immigrating to Christian countries versus the opposite. So I asked you, I don't know the
didn't
number.
mean the exact number. I meant which is more.
I have no idea.
It's obviously more Muslims moving to Christian countries because Christian countries are better places to live.
I can't tell that from any of the numbers. It looks like Muslim countries are going to be the better places to live. Have you seen Dubai?
I wouldn't want to live in Dubai.
Oh yeah, what would you think you don't want to live in Dubai?
There's some things that are more important than money.
Yeah, what makes you not want to live in Dubai? Like which policies?
I don't know all their specific policies, but I don't want to live there.
Apparently, you seem to know like enough to make the decision that no, I don't want to live there. So like, which policies?
It's a Muslim country. I don't want to live in a Muslim country.
Yeah, why do you not want to live in a Muslim country?
Because they're an inferior culture that I don't want to be a part
inferior?
of. Because they don't believe in human rights.
Yeah, I think Christian countries don't believe in human rights in the majority of cases. I think they get more believe in human rights when they're atheistic. So what's the symmetry breaker?
Not all Christians obviously believe exactly what I believe. I wish they did, but they don't. But you do see way more respect for human rights in traditionally Christian countries
We
than
also
not.
see that in atheistic countries and secular countries. As countries go more secular, we see them believe in human rights much more.
Those secular countries are still traditionally Christian. They might have recently lost their religion, but they're still kind of running off the fumes of Christianity.
Oh, but there's
Truly
traditionally
atheistic
Zoroastrian.
countries, truly atheistic countries have murdered millions of their own people through communism.
And traditionally Christian countries have murdered millions and billions of their own people for rejection of human rights and rejection of even basic human decency.
Yeah, Christians aren't perfect. I wish they were. I hope that one day we get there.
Yeah, no country's perfect. We agree. You're just positing a not a, a symmetrical break, a non-symmetry breaker of a case. You're positing a case
It's a
that's true for both.
comparison between two things.
Yeah,
When we
and it's the same
compare two
criticism
things,
for both of these things. So what you're positing is like the difference here of like, oh, atheists killed a lot of people. Christians did too. This isn't a symmetry breaker.
not as many, not as many.
Christians killed a lot more.
No.
How many people do you think atheists killed throughout history?
In the 1900s, the number of people killed by communism has been far more than the number of people killed from any Christian ideology.
Yeah, so what
Like
are those numbers?
even fascism, the worst that Christianity had to offer was the rise of fascism, and it's nothing compared to the death toll from communism.
What are the rough
And
ideas?
we reject fascism too.
Yeah, what are the rough ideas?
So
But you said it's far more. You should be at least able to ballpark. How many times
I'm
more? Is it
why
a
do you
factor of
keep
10?
asking me to ballpark numbers? I'm
Because
not
you're
gonna
referencing
ballpark numbers.
numbers. You're referencing numbers.
If you want to look it up, you can look it up. I'm not going to
You're referencing
ballpark a
numbers and then
number.
saying like, "Oh, I have no clue what these
It's
numbers
far
even could
more.
be."
I know that I've looked
I
it
know
up
it's
and it's
far
far
less. I
more.
know it's far less. I looked up. It's far less.
Well, you're wrong.
Well, you're wrong. I'm sorry. It's just far less. I
Okay.
looked it up.
You're free to be wrong.
I know you are. That's why I'm confused. That's why you're coping about it so hard.
You can have a society and you can do whatever crazy stuff in
Yeah,
it.
we are. It's called the United States of America.
And I should be free to have a society where we have social norms,
You
and
do. It's
we
called the
teach
United
our
Arab Emirates.
children what?
You do. It's called the United Arab Emirates. It
Oh
also
my
has a
god.
ton of immigration.
Where we teach our children not to kill their babies in the womb and to respect human life and that you can't change your sex by mutilating yourself and that marriage is between a man and a woman, and we could teach these things to our children, and we'll be better off. My grandchildren will be better off than your grandchildren, and we can let that play out in the competition of cultural evolution and see who wins.
Evidently, you don't agree with that because you don't want the countries that believe in these things to succeed. You're saying that, oh, they're Muslim countries, so they're worse.
I
You're
want
just
Muslim countries
describing
to
Kuwait.
succeed.
You're just
I would love
describing.
it if Muslim
You're
countries succeed.
describing Saudi
Succeed.
Arabia.
Just because I share some values with Muslims doesn't mean
The vast
that
majority you
because they
listed
get a
were
lot of the
more similar to
fundamentals wrong.
Saudi Arabia than the United States.
You're not even arguing good faith at this point.
I'm arguing direct good faith. The categories you listed of what you valued are more in line with Saudi values than American values.
Because those are the things I'm thinking about that America is screwing up. If I was a Muslim in a Muslim country, I would be more concerned about human rights. And I would be like, we need to liberalize these laws because we shouldn't be throwing gay people off of roofs, for example. That's what I would be concerned about. But I'm an American in America. And so my concern is that we've become too liberal.
Yeah, again, this is literally just non-American things.
What?
You're literally just deciding a lot more in line with Saudi values than American values. Every criticism you listed fits in line with Saudi.
You can go too far authoritarian and too I don't know if I don't really like the left right thing, but go too far in like order and control and be giving people the death penalty for all types of things, and that's really bad. And you can also go too far in the other direction and not even have proper social norms. And so you need to be in the right sweet spot where you have social norms for the things you should have social norms about, and you should have laws for against violent crime, and you shouldn't use violence against peaceful people. And you like, so I would criticize like I on Twitter, if you look at my Twitter, I will get into debates with like far right Christian people who want to make it illegal to commit sodomy. And I think that's wrong. That's too far in the other direction. You have to get the sweet spot.
So would you just be fine with an Islamic Ancapistan?
I mean, I'm fine with them doing what they want in their country, and I don't feel like it's really my job to criticize them because that's not my thing. I feel like it's appropriate to criticize my society, but I definitely have advice for them if they want it. I would love it if they embraced human rights, but if they want to embrace Ancapistan, that would be great.
I don't know anymore at this point. It's been like a little over 2 hours. Is this like a fair enough point to end
Yeah,
starting it?
sure.
This was really
I can
fun.
send you the file. Yeah. I can send you the file and you can put it on your YouTube if you want.
I had my OBS running for this. I made sure
Okay.
to. Yep.
Okay.
Appreciate
I
that.
might keep going and like react to stuff.
Go for it.
I haven't done that yet.
It was a fun talk. I
Okay.
appreciate it. Thank you.
All right.
Have a
Bye.
good night.